Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, plans to start soon removing highly radioactive water from the number 2 reactor at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. A large amount of contaminated water was found in the reactor's turbine buildings and tunnels. The water is emitting high levels of radiation, which is obstructing restoration work. TEPCO had been working to empty the turbine condenser of the reactor and its processing facility for nuclear waste, and on Saturday successfully transferred all the water in the condenser to a separate tank. Hoses are being installed to connect the turbine buildings with a waste disposal facility. The contaminated water in the tunnel of the reactor will be transferred to the condenser and then to the processing facility through the hoses. Also on Saturday, a steel plate was placed over the intake of the number 2 reactor to stop highly radioactive water from reaching the sea.
Japan's Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency says the safety measures for nuclear plants compiled before the problem of the new Fukushima Daiichi facility are not sufficient. Senior agency official Hidehiko Nishiyama spoke to reporters on Saturday. He said he thought nuclear power plants across Japan were completely safe because they included multiple layers of protection systems. But he said it's necessary to re-examine safety protocols beyond the regulations formulated in the past and to review the measures based on what happened to the nuclear power plants in the quake-hit areas. The reactors at the Fukushima plant lost their emergency generators as well as their external power supply after the March 11th earthquake and tsunami. Operator Tokyo Electric Power Company has not yet restored the reactor's cooling systems. Thursday's major aftershock disabled all outside power lines at Higashidori Nuclear Power Plant in Aomori Prefecture. The operator was able to use emergency power generators and eventually restored outside power. But later, it found that the emergency power generators were not functioning properly.
The U.S. military has demonstrated to the public drills by a special unit dispatched to deal with the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. About 150 members of the unit, which specializes in dealing with the effects of nuclear-related disasters, carried out the drills at Yokota Air Base in Tokyo on Saturday. In an exercise to rescue people trapped in a building, members wearing protective gear first carefully carried out procedures to measure radiation levels. In a tent set up near the building, radioactive materials were washed off the rescued people, and doctors performed physical examinations. The drill included rescuing people trapped in a car, and a surveillance robot was unveiled that can operate in hazardous environments. The unit's commander says his team is working day and night, along with the self-defense forces, to utilize their abilities to the fullest, and that their morale is high.
An emergency ministerial meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has been held in Jakarta, Indonesia, to discuss how to cope with major disasters in the wake of the March 11th earthquake and tsunami in Japan. The meeting on Saturday was proposed by Indonesia, which was devastated by the powerful Sumatra tsunami in 2004. In the meeting, Japan's Foreign Minister Takeaki Matsumoto expressed gratitude for aid from his Asian counterparts and stressed that the Japanese government is determined to restore the country by combining the people's strength and help from the international community. The participants discussed aid to Japan from Southeast Asia and Asian-Japan cooperation on the management of disasters in the region. On the nuclear accident at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, Matsumoto mentioned Japan's all-out efforts to stop the spread of radioactive materials. He stressed that Japan will continue to be transparent in providing information to the international community. The foreign minister also reassured Asian member nations that Japan is duly inspecting its food exports.
China says it will expand its ban on agricultural imports from Japan due to public concerns about radioactive contamination in food. The Chinese government announced on Saturday that it was adding 6 prefectures to the current 5, bringing the total to 11, including Tokyo. It said it will require Japanese exporters to submit official documents on place of origin or certification that foods from outside prohibited areas have been tested for radioactivity. Concerns increased among the Chinese public about radiation in food after authorities detected an extremely low level of radioactive iodine in spinach grown in Beijing and Tianjin. There are also worries about the fact that the Japanese nuclear plant operator had discharged low-level radioactive water into the ocean. The Japanese embassy in Beijing said China's move is contradictory to trends in Japan, and that it will call on the Chinese government to base its actions on rationality and scientific findings.
You're listening to NHK World, Radio Japan in Tokyo. The National Police Agency says that as of Saturday afternoon, 12,898 people are confirmed dead, and 14,824 others have been listed as missing in the aftermath of the March 11th disaster and its aftershock that hit northeastern Japan. About 82% of the bodies recovered have been identified and are being handed over to families. The number of deaths could rise because in some coastal areas devastated by the tsunami, the exact number of missing people have yet to be confirmed. Search operations within the 20-kilometer exclusion zone around the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant are being hampered by radiation. More than 153,000 people from disaster-hit areas are living in evacuation centers.
Earthquake and tsunami survivors began to move into temporary housing in the city of Rikuzen Takata in Iwate Prefecture, northern Japan, on Saturday. They are the first people to use temporary housing in the areas hit by the March 11th disaster. The city needs about 4,000 temporary houses for those who have stayed in evacuation centers. The first 36 temporary houses have been completed. On Saturday morning, people chosen by lot entered the newly built houses with futons and daily necessities. A 74-year-old man who moved into a house with his wife and family says he has had no chance to think about his future yet, but that he will do his best to live day by day.
Japan's Toyota Motor says it will suspend production at 13 of its 14 plants in North America for 4 days by April 25th, citing possible shortages in parts supply from the quake-hit areas of Japan. This will result in production cuts of 35,000 vehicles. The company had already halted weekend overtime and Saturday operations at these plants after parts suppliers were devastated by the March 11th earthquake and tsunami. Toyota says this is the first time that the company will suspend their operations simultaneously in the United States.
Meanwhile, major electronics maker Sharp says it will suspend production of LCD panels at 2 of its major manufacturing plants in Japan until early May due to a shortage of an industrial gas. Sharp says it has sufficient panels in stock and that the suspension of operations at these factories will not affect the production of LCD TVs.
Finally, let's take another look at the top stories at this hour. Tokyo Electric Power Company plans to soon start removing highly radioactive water from the number 2 reactor at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Japan's Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency says safety measures for nuclear plants have not been sufficient, taking into consideration the problems at Fukushima Daiichi.
And that was the news from NHK World Radio Japan in Tokyo. I'm Joseph Quinn.